Hey, hello, welcome to Geek Freaks. I am Frank, and today I'm joined by Heleor, creator of Gen Fanad. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Can you explain for the folks at home what Gen Fanad is?
So Genfinod came from basically two inspirations. One is a hobby project where I was playing around during my day job as a software engineer, just learning new technologies and
Hmm.
being like, well, these guys 20 years ago created an MMO in their garage. How hard can it be?
Yeah.
And here I am 2.5 years later with a whole team behind me. Genfinod is one of the best way to describe it is it's one of the new entries in the whole retro revival movement. So if you're familiar with Ukulele, Bloodstained, all of those games that were created by people with small or no connection to the original properties and just creating a game that inspired them as children or that inspired them growing up. Genfanad is basically our take on what RuneScape Classic would have been like if it was created these days. Many people are familiar with RuneScape these days as a large MMORPG that
Hmm.
has some pretty wonky mechanics. They recently introduced the concept of old school RuneScape, which is basically a revival of their 2005 era. That's not what we're going for. We're actually going even deeper into the past. And back in 2001, when RuneScape was a little Java application with some wonky sprites wandering around in a 3D world, back before the concept of MMOs was even really well established, before World of Warcraft.
Yeah, it was the Wild West of that era. I'm a big World of Warcraft fan, and of course, RuneScape always gave a nod to it. It does definitely have that, like crafting first, and you're building the narrative and the story through communicating with others. Uh, what about RuneScape did you want to bring and other games like it, did you want to bring forward into your own?
One of the things that the most inspired me was the fact that you can log in, you can go into this you can go into the second world, and you could do whatever you want, and whatever progress you made was always kept. You
Mhm.
would never be wasting time or doing something that is suboptimal. You would just play, and your numbers would keep going up. It was a very relaxing experience at the time. And one of the stories that I most really love about the time when I played it is early mornings, Monday mornings, when you would be playing and the little yellow text would pop up that says system is going offline for update. We want to bring that feeling to new players of actual uncertainty. What is going to come out? What is the new thing that we're going to explore? What is the new thing that I'm going to be able to do that's going to be cool? A lot of games these days focus on quarterly or yearly release cycles, if they even do have any post release content. As an indie studio, we have the opportunity to actually do something different and actually bring the concept of weekly updates, weekly content updates to our players.
How far out do you plan those weekly updates? Because I know that's something that your community's big on.
Right now, we're currently in our beta process for Kickstarter backers, and we're figuring out what the edges that our team can create, how long
Mhm.
it takes to create updates, how we can manage having multiple updates being developed at the same time, how many bugs we find, and how the QA system works. It's basically the further into the future you go, the less certain it becomes.
Of course.
So I know when our game is planning to launch. I know the first 4 to 8 updates that are going to happen after the launch. And I know the high level themes of basically every month up through the middle of next year. And our team is contributing to that. And we're trying to figure out the best way to actually deliver on the promise of weekly content updates without overwhelming ourselves.
Yeah, that is quite the check to sign off on. So I like you said you monthly themes. Is that kind of the idea? Like we're gonna have pirate theme this month?
From a high level, that's how we're breaking it up so that we don't have to. There's the concept of an empty canvas that all artists are always both fascinated by and terrified of.
Yeah.
And when you have an empty sheet in front of you and you don't know what to draw, it's very difficult. But as soon as you draw the first line as a constraint, your mind starts thinking and it starts being more creative.
Right.
And having the high level themes are basically our way of putting some structure on the uncertainty. In the case of the world map and in the case of the world of New Blandia that we're currently working on, the first continent is actually almost complete in terms of a map design perspective. So we know which areas are going to be coming out. We don't know when they're going to happen. We don't know what's going to be in them necessarily, but we know this is what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
For other things like quest content, or even more specifically, game design and monster balance and things like that, those are a lot more up to the minute so that we can react to players saying, hey, this monster doesn't feel right, or
Mhm.
hey, this monster doesn't feel worth it to fight. Let's buff. Hey, this monster seems to be dropping too much. Let's nerf.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. The ability from an indie developer, somebody who's dedicated as you, is able to quickly respond, and the player doesn't have to wait for the next Tuesday to get an update, and hopefully that works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't.
Mhm.
That is nice to have.
One of the games that we're looking at specifically for that type of update methodology is Dota, or
Mhm.
League of Legends for the more casual folks among you. The concept of those patch notes that actually take and shuffle up every single part of the game. So if you look at Dota's patch notes, you can see like hundreds of different tiny changes that individually don't change very much, but taken as a whole actually force people to rethink the things that they already know about the game. Like
Exactly.
this person gets +1 movement speed and this person gets -3 damage. Those are all tiny inconsequential changes, but when you have 100 of them coming together, you basically have a new game to rediscover every week.
And adjust, and the balancing adjusts character selection and stuff like that, and how you approach your foe. Which even in PVE, when you're thinking about, hey, this creature's dying too easy, stuff like that, it'll have you reapproach that. This game's already
Mhm.
sounding amazing, and I'm excited to get my hands on it. Uh, what game did you grow up on? You had RuneScape. Was there any other games you were growing up on and really enjoying?
I come from the Nintendo side of things,
Yeah.
so I enjoyed. Actually, as a kid, I didn't have the ability to play any consoles. I had pretty strict parents who
Yeah.
didn't understand video games, so we had a computer early on that we could download old DOS games to that we can
Hmm.
play occasionally. But I have a distinct memory of two distinct memories of retro games. The first one was when my parents finally gave in and bought me my first console, which was the Game Boy Color, and I got a
Nice.
copy of Pokemon Red at the time.
Nice.
That I wore down so many batteries from just playing that game at the time. And the second one was the first time when we went into Blockbuster and we actually rented the N64 at the time. And the game that we chose was Pokemon Snap, where you could take the pictures and then go back to the store and get them
Yeah.
printed out. Those two memories are crystallized, distinct in my head. They have nothing to do with the game I'm developing, but that's the feeling of childhood wonder that we wanted to bring to the players of the game.
Well, it may not, you might not see Pokemon Snap. Well, I mean, you never know. There could be a content update, guys, one of these weeks, and all of a sudden you're taking pictures and stuff. But those fed into who you are, the creator of this video game. You then went off and decided to become, a programmer and stuff like that. What about video games pulled you out of that? Like, you kind of wanted to go out on your own. What pulled you away?
So I'm actually not coming from a video game perspective.
Mhm.
Professionally, I've worked as a software engineer at various big companies to be able to learn and develop things. After a decade in that business, I was playing around with video games as a hobby, and I thought, hey, this might actually be something interesting.
Yeah.
I knew that I wanted to try to pursue this slightly more seriously when I was sitting around just dinking around with a prototype, and it was completely empty. There were some trees, there was a character, there was no purpose. It was a local copy of the game. There was
Yeah.
no high scores. There was no character state save, and I found myself just clicking trees and listening to the thunk and watching them turn into stumps. And I just felt that very relaxed, just doing that over and over again. Should have been coding. I should have been doing other things. Nope, I was just clicking trees. I know that that type of gameplay experience is not for everyone, and I know that there's a lot of cases where people have outlets of similar things. But I thought that relaxing gameplay was just something that spoke to me at the time, and I thought that I bet people would like this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's MMOs in general are not for everybody. MMORPGs, there's dedication and the understanding that, yeah, a relaxation in a game is required sometimes. And so you definitely have a fan base there that's gonna be looking for that.
And interestingly enough, the MMOs actually have a pretty bad rap these days. They're for people who have no lives, that are for people to
Yeah.
basically take a second job. EVE Online actually has a very, very strict reputation in that regard, where it's basically a spreadsheet simulator. And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. MMOs as a gameplay element are something that people can do for small bursts of time. The whole concept of you have this character and it just levels up with you is something that is appealing to the wider market. Games like Animal Crossing have been very successful. Games like Farmville have been very successful in the past just by taking these small goals and repetitive tasks and making them appealing for players. We kind of want to position ourselves as not a hardcore experience at all. All of the marketing we've been doing has been basically humorous, has been taking a piss out of MMOs in general and industry trends as well.
Yeah.
And we want to make it so that you can play Genfanod as a casual player, as someone who's a new parent who has 5 minutes between tasks holding their kids. They can go in and click some trees.
Yeah.
As someone who goes in and wants to spend 20 minutes just doing a new quest. That type of gameplay, MMOs have historically been very much all in. You have to go in and you have to spend a large chunk of your life just to be successful. We
Yeah.
want to try to avoid that pitfall.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, people the term min-maxing, we wanna make sure that you're as competitive as possible or else you feel like you're not doing it. It's nice to be able to have an outlet where you're just enjoying yourself, which is what games are for.
Yep, RuneScape had the concept, community concept of XP waste, and that is absolutely not something we want to encourage.
What in current MMOs need to be changed, or are you trying to address through your game, outside of just the XP waste?
You mentioned you're a World of Warcraft player, and one of
Yeah,
the flaws that I see in World of Warcraft design, and this isn't necessarily a flaw. Obviously, every game designer is building towards their constraints and their audience and
right.
their specific requirements. But as a player, one of the things that I see in World of Warcraft is this didn't actually exist when it first came out, but as new expansions came out and as the content curve and as the uh, new content was created at higher levels, they basically requested or forced players to churn through all of their existing content just so that they can catch up to their friends and they can do the end game raids and the
Yeah,
end game multiplayer experiences. In my mind, that early game content, the low level case where you're just building up to a new sword, where you're trying, when you're not optimal, where you don't know the best strategies, where you're exploring and trying to figure out what, in my mind, those are the best experiences. And
oh, yeah.
trying to rush through them is something that I don't like seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a kind of a speed run vibe that a lot of people have nowadays. And speaking to World of Warcraft, it took them what 17 years to put in a system that negates most of the game, so people can catch up to their friends. And even
Mhm.
that is by no means perfect. It's still there's always something to be fixed over there. But there is something to MMO players that I want to add is one of the big benefits to this is say I just beat Stray for example. Game's done. It was great. There goes my $30. But I have characters on like World of Warcraft and other MMOs that have been there since 2004. And
Mhm.
it's like a D&D character, right? Where the D&D
Yep.
character means so much to you. Will the people playing Genferrod be able to have that connection and extended life with their characters?
People generally get an attachment to things that they do for a long time, whether that be a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
Uh, Sunk cost fallacy is a thing, but the fact that you have a character that has your chosen name, your chosen appearance, and you interact with the world as it grows, as it expands, means that players will have a chance to build those attachments. If someone wants to create another character for role playing, that is absolutely great. We have a character, we have a player right now who's role playing in the Discord as a lover of pineapples, and they love it whenever we release a pineapple content, and they hate it whenever we create a recipe where people eat pineapples. Those types of wonky interactions are always going to happen and are always part of the richness of a community, a part of the richness of the people playing.
Yeah, I love that. The community behind this game is so unique and really passionate. It's just wonderful. All right, let's go ahead and let's focus on Gen Fanod. What's the size of the map going in? I know you already said you got the first continent planned, but how big's that map?
As part of the whole, as part of the process where we're trying to reach weekly updates, we're actually breaking up the content and trying to establish a release pipeline such that we give people the feeling of a world that is being expanded rather
Yeah,
than them jumping into something that is already complete. So different parts of the world are at different stages of completion. We start with the theme and the area of generic fantasy, things that you would see in various light novel series today where you're an adventurer, you get this armor, you kill a slime or a rat, and you just keep building up your character with a bit of a corporate fourth wall breaking
Yeah, it's
humor
funny,
as
so I
well.
love it.
And we actually have we've just revamped the tutorial, and we have the cliche employees rushing the adventurers through their new simulated experience, and then we have the bankers there and so on.
Mhm.
In terms of maps, we are starting relatively small, relatively self-contained, such that we can focus on the details of those maps. So starting with the fantasy, generic fantasy, expanding into the spooky area of the Costin Ridge, which is our mountain Halloween, mummies, zombies, skeletons, that type of inspiration.
Yeah,
Expanding into fairy tales to another direction, expanding into the American Midwest. So like actual westerns and gunslingers and cowboys and satyrs and things like that, as well as magic schools, the American colonies,
mm,
Innsmouth, Lovecraftian inspired areas, Canada, uh, and also we're basically mining every single piece of pop culture that we can for
heck
all
yeah,
of the inspirations.
yeah,
Uh, One other game that we're actually looking at for inspiration that is not in our genre at all, but Magic the Gathering has
mhm,
existed for uh, 30 years now, and they have consistently delivered four yearly expansions over and over again, while still having the same game design core.
yeah,
We would love to have something like that be our legacy.
yeah, I mean, that's those are great people to idolize right there, that's a good call. Wizards of the Coast, they did a great job. I really like that idea of each zone being so unique because not only does the player identify with their character, but now because they're so unique, they can start to identify with the zone. Like, oh yeah, I'm from cowboy area, and so I defend and rep cowboy area. It just that's fun to me. I really like that idea.
In RuneScape, there was actually a set of YouTubers that were doing various challenges. Like one person said, "I'm going to live in Mauritania and I'm going to do all of the Mauritania content without ever leaving."
Yeah,
Uh, that again goes back to the community. People are creative. People are always going to funnel that creativity in interesting ways, and I can't wait to see what people do with what we build.
speaking of the players, this is a kind of like RuneScape as well. This is a crafting focused game, correct?
I wouldn't necessarily call it that. We've
Okay,
put a lot of effort to make sure that the crafting gameplay loop is as compelling and as interesting as various combat gameplay loops have been in other games.
yeah,
Things like our forging system, for example, aren't just take a bar and turn it into an item. We actually have a nice, interesting uh, skill tree where there's a lot of intermediate items. Every different type of item that you craft uh, has success and failure rates, and you can make
oh
a
wow,
high quality, medium quality, or low quality version of them. And that way, if you want to make a high quality giant sword, which might be the culmination of your forging experience, you're actually going to have to work for it, just like you're going to have to work for killing a big boss or figuring out the mechanics and taking down an interesting quest.
that's more complicated than some of modern MMOs. So success already right there. You have 16 skills and 30 planned. Can you give us just a few of the skills to kind of give us an idea of what we're looking at?
So of course we're going to have the standard fantasy equivalent of mining and smithing and uh, making bows and making cloth armor, tailoring. What we've basically done is we've taken the list of medieval professions, both fantasy and real life,
Mhm,
and we've taken an approach to try to figure out how to group them together into chunks of tasks that would make sense together. So, for example, we've created the skill called artistry, which represents, well, being artistic. And in that skill, we've grouped together pottery, jewelry, crafting, paper making, drawing, things like that. When people look at the game, they're basically going to see, well, this looks like RuneScape. You can't really get too far from mining and smithing and combat and things like that. Some of the things that we definitely want to get into the future and things that we've prototyped and implemented parts of already are things like sailing, of course.
mhm.
the closest inspiration to sail to how we're going to be doing sailing is from the Pokemon games. In the early games, you could surf,
Mhm.
where you would actually just basically walk around on water and be able to access all of these different areas. That's something that players are really excited for, where you can actually get into a sailboat and walk around on water. What is outside of where they expect? What are some of the things they can discover there?
Yeah, hidden areas,
Uh,
especially with the weekly updates, that's gonna even be more anticipated, like, "Oh, let's go see what's over here now."
Additionally, some things that we're basically thinking through are alchemy, which are potions for with like quick use effects or small bursts of performance for whether that be for combat or for skills. Things like bounty hunter, which is
Oh,
a
wow.
alternate game loop uh, where you are basically told which monsters to hunt down, and you get bonuses for completing tasks rather than just going and grinding 500 cows just to level up.
Yeah.
Things like treasure hunting, things like music, things like astrology. Uh, Basically, what we have is we implemented the simple, straightforward skills that are needed to build up your character. And we have a lot of brainstorming and a lot of long term ideas for what are other parts of the game design that would make for compelling content.
Yeah, and I like how you're focusing on game loops, like with the bounty hunting. It's so important and oftentimes not spoken about, and especially in MMOs. I mean, it's so important, and I'm glad that you're focusing on that. That's pretty cool. All right, so I know you're working hard on this game. It is a big passion of yours. What kind of team have you built around this?
One of the things about building a team of as an indie studio is that you get an opportunity to work with people who are all over the world, who are remote, who have all sorts of different cultural inspirations, who have different backgrounds, who can contribute in different ways.
Mhm.
And our team is actually very distributed around the world. We have a large portion of Canadians for some reason, but we also have people from the Philippines, people from Europe, and so forth. Basically, anywhere you can throw a dart at a board, you can probably find one of our team members.
Yeah.
We have a nice variety of uh, freelance work of various different styles. So the game is going to come together in a slightly eclectic way, where some parts won't necessarily match, and different areas might have slightly different visual inspirations and slightly different art styles, and that's part of the charm,
Yeah,
in
totally.
my opinion. I think having a large, diverse group of individuals all contributing their own voices to the game lets it speak louder than something that is just prescribed from up above.
Yeah, it feels too washed out when you do that. So I like that idea
Mhm.
of every little thing there. And then you're Seattle based, right?
I personally live in Seattle, but I think I'm the only one on the team uh, from Seattle, and I'm actually one of only 2 to 3 Americans on the team.
Yeah. That's amazing that this game's being developed all remotely. It's so cool to see. Um, where did this community build up? Where did you find your talent?
So it actually came from just putting the word out and searching for people to contribute. Some people discovered the game organically and joined the team from there, and others responded to various job ads that I posted.
One of the things I wanted to talk about as well is this is going to be able to be played in the browser, which means it could also be on tablet and phone. Is that correct?
Uh, we're currently building it with web technologies so that we can push it to tablets and phones. It doesn't. We have it running on the Steam Deck. We have it
Okay.
running on phones, but it doesn't quite work perfectly. There's still going to be a lot of work in order to bring a fully fledged mobile experience to life.
Hmm.
Uh, but as I mentioned before, from the casual audience perspective, it is definitely our goal that people can just pick it up on their phone and just play it for a couple minutes at a time.
That's perfect.
That's definitely part of the audience. We're starting on the browser. We're starting on Steam, as those are the biggest. Those cover the biggest subset of the audience.
Hmm.
But we absolutely want to bring it wherever it makes sense.
I love the idea of where you got a break at work and then you just check in and cut down a couple trees, hop out. That's perfect. How can people find you and your community and get involved?
So our community is primarily on Discord today. So people who have some time can check in and look at the game as it's being developed, jump in Right now, we're running a closed beta, but
Mhm.
once the game releases, you can jump into the game, you can talk to other players, you can interact with the community there. And all of the links are, of course, on our website at gentleman.com, where uh, you can see all of the different social media accounts. You can see the news posts that we're posting, and you can create an account yourself uh, for when the game is ready.
We'll make sure to include those links in the description of this podcast as well, guys, so you guys can poke around and get involved as well. Genfanod, generic fantasy adventure. I love that name. It takes a bit to get used to. My tongue keeps
Mhm.
tripping on itself, but it's great. Uh, Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope everybody goes and checks this thing out. Thank you very much for joining me.
All right. Thank you very much for hosting.
All right, guys, please go check this out. Again, the links are in the description, and then come on by next week. All right, guys, bye.